Have you ever come across the perfect match between system and IP? What's the worst matchup of system and IP that you've experienced?
I'm going to take it that this means, an intellectual property that existed outside of gaming before, right? Because we can talk about system and setting, but that's a different question to system and intellectual property. I think possibly the worst match of system and intellectual property was the Leading Edge Games Aliens game. You watch Aliens, the pace is frenetic, fast, scary, right? Leading Edge's system was a highly simulationist game of modern combat originally. So, you get into a firefight in Aliens and it just takes forever and is extremely deadly as well at the same time. But somehow that doesn't speed the combat up very much. And it played out more like a skirmish game than an RPG. So I think that was an issue. That's definitely up there. That's a contender. During the D20 boom of the 3rd edition era, I think a hell of a lot of games were made as sort of quick churn it out, turn a profit sort of thing, where the D20 system was just manifestly unsuited to the intellectual properties that were being exploited. I mean, anything modern day just really doesn't work with out of the box modern firearms and things. Trading hit points and so on. It just doesn't work. So virtually any intellectual property that was exploited with the D20 system during the D20 boom, and we've had a smaller repeat of that with 5th edition D&D. I mean, you've all seen the articles, right? Here's how to play Cyberpunk Edgerunners using 5th edition D&D. Or you could use Cyberpunk. I mean, it's a game, it's out there, you can play it. How cool would that be? But no. So yeah, that's where I would look for those sorts of issues, but possibly Leading Edge's Aliens, or maybe the old He-Man game, but that just wasn't a complete game, and the same with the Dallas RPG. It wasn't really a complete playable game in the sense that we would think of it today. So those are issues. Those are problematic. In terms of the perfect matchup, tricky. I'm tempted to say Savage Worlds Rifts, because the system definitely needed fixing, and just about anything other than Palladium is a good fix. I found the Fallout implementation of the 2D20 system by Modiphius to be a good one. That both kind of expanded the 2D20 system out into something that I felt was more usable, but also did manage to capture the feel of Fallout for me. That may have been the players as well. The one stumbling block is the vehicle rules, which always seem to be a stumbling block in games for some reason. It's always fundamentally unsatisfying and doesn't feel right to me, either cinematically or realistically. But overall, it was pretty good. I'd even somewhat controversially say that the earlier versions of 2D20 that were done for their more sort of pulp titles, like John Carter of Mars or Conan, I think the implementation of that system there tied into the IP. But I think they use it in a lot of places where they shouldn't. Generic systems have problems I don't much like the implementation in the Djinn game, for example. And yeah, other times they haven't used it when it would have been a better choice, like the Dust Adventures book would have been far better as a 2D20 book, I think, along the lines of Fallout, than it is as its own system. And it doesn't tie in with the rest of the Dust universe's systems either, which is another whole issue. So if you're looking for good systems, I think generally speaking, it's better if it's a tailor-made system. West End Games Star Wars is a fine example of an implementation of what became a generic system, but what worked really well as an introductory Star Wars game. And for bad ones, anything where someone uses a version of D&D where they really shouldn't has got to be a contender there. I'm not talking about the OSR, that often bends D&D completely out of shape, but that D20 glut and the 5th edition glut, that's where you find some real howlers.